first up is Bride of Chucky. So long story short, Chucky's been resurrected by his old girlfriend. She thought it would be all love and kisses, but he kind of acts like a jerk to her. She locks him into a crib, he escapes and kills her, he turns her into a doll. And then, because they're both dolls, I guess she kind of accepts what it is, and they go on a trip to recover an amulet that is needed to transfer their souls back into human bodies, and of course there is a big killing spree along the way. So I hope I summed that up pretty good. Now, anytime we talk about a Chucky movie, I must tell everyone out there, Child's Play, my all-time favorite movie. So obviously I'm a huge Chucky fan. Bride of Chucky, at the time this came out, I was still in high school. I lived in a rural area. I don't even know if this movie played somewhat locally, so I would have loved to have seen it in cinema, but I didn't. And that's that. But for this movie itself, I think over time I've kind of liked it a little less. When it came out, a lot of people loved it, especially they found it quite funny as well. It is somewhat of a comedy in addition to all of the horror. Something about it is just over time, and I think maybe because it paved the way for the worst movie in the series, which is Seed of Chucky, with its whole horror comedy aspect. It's always had moments of, it's had its funny moments in the previous three movies, but this one obviously took it up to a new notch, and I don't know if when they made Seed of Chucky, they kind of thought, okay, we need to keep making these funnier, but yeah, that doesn't work. But, Bride of Chucky, I still enjoy it. Being a Chucky fan, it has Chucky in it. Just him being in a movie itself, that's worth probably at least 6 points to me. But before I get more into that, what are your general thoughts about this one?
Yeah, much like you, I used to like this quite a bit more when I was younger. I can't say when I first saw this one, but I'm going to say I saw bits and pieces like when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And I remember some scenes actually scaring me back when I was a kid. One scene that comes to mind is the water bath scene. Mainly because the execution's not great, but it was somewhat grisly. Especially for a younger kid. But I have to say, seeing it again, I don't think it ages that well. And I used to like the movie a hell of a lot more than I do now. I'm not saying it's necessarily a terrible movie, but the comedy they put in this movie is a lot more hitting you over the head than the first three movies are. Which I guess could have been okay if maybe the story was a little better, but the whole thing with Tiffany, I'm not like a giant fan of that. And there's a few reasons, but it just felt too ridiculous. And then you get to add like the in-jokes, like the Pinhead reference, and you see Freddy's glove early on. It's too tongue-in-cheek, and that really turned it off for me.
Man, that was some cheap props at the start there with the Jason mask or the hockey mask.
Hey, but it proves it's all in the same universe, though.
Yeah, the movie does have some decent death scenes, or some imaginative death scenes, I guess you could say, but at the end of the day, I don't know if people are actually watching a Chucky movie for the kills. I guess it's a good part of it, but
I think it's probably a combination of the kills or just for Brad Dourif, to be honest.
Yeah, like I said, it's just Chucky himself in the movie that really does the majority of the work needed to make a somewhat decent movie, and usually that's just his personality. That's the biggest attribute to the character, is personality above all things. So to me, it doesn't matter too much what the kills are like. Obviously I want them to be decent, and they are in this movie, so that's fine. I guess another thing is that the whole amulet thing it kind of does my head in a little bit, because we go through 3 movies, it's never mentioned, it's not necessarily ever been needed to do any chanting or anything, and now suddenly they add this in as a way to push this plot forward. I don't know. It just didn't really gel with me.
Yeah, I just think some of the stuff they added in was really necessary. I don't necessarily mind Tiffany as a character, but I don't know, just the whole thing it just felt ridiculous. I know that's probably partially what they were going for, but obviously, if you know me, I'm not as much a fan as the more silly horror movies, and this movie did tend to get a bit silly at times, especially with some of the characters, like the one gay guy. That guy just annoyed me more than anything else.
Yeah. But at least you got to see some doll sex.
Hey, we actually got to see John Ritter, so there is one positive thing to this. It's a shame he was such a dick, but at least he was hit.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of John Ritter myself, but I mean, he's okay. I don't dislike him. I've just I know he's a fairly famous actor, but I've never really understood his appeal, I guess.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's always nice for me to see an actor I know from other stuff. So since I grew up with both, I obviously watched Stephen King's It a lot as a child, the 90 miniseries. So seeing him in another movie, even though he's not particularly partial in his role, just sort of a little nice something for me to see, and it gives me a little more, I guess, not reason to enjoy it, but gives me a little something more to look forward to.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny because you mentioned It, the 1990 version, and I already mentioned Child's Play as my all-time favorite movie. The 1990 version of It is my second favorite movie. So, obviously, I know John Ritter from that, but still, even with that in mind, him as an actor he's fine in the movie, and he's been fine in other movies. He's just never been one of those actors that's really, I'm watching this movie because John Ritter's in it,
Well, I think part of it might just be because he died so young, too. So, you have to feel somewhat disappointed about that, even if you weren't like a giant fan of his.
Yeah. Well, my most memorable John Ritter moment in any movie is just the face he pulls in that Bad Santa movie when Bernie Mac's talking about anal sex or something. Anyways, we'll steer back to Bride of Chucky here. Another thing that I can't really blame this movie, even though it's the first movie to do it in the series, but I guess in a way I'm also peeved that they got rid of the Child's Play name for the title. It's not a huge thing, but and I guess you don't want to see it go, Child's Play 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, because eventually we're probably going to have, 10 plus Chucky movies by the time the franchise is done with, but I don't know. I've just never just quite gotten attached to all these something of Chucky titles, Obviously they're taken from things like Bride of Frankenstein,
Yeah, Son of Dracula, all the classics.
Yeah. I can kind of see why they thought it would be a good idea to do it. I just kind of, I don't know, maybe it's because the first 3 movies are still the most special movies in the franchise for me. Like, the only thing we really have left from that is the title. Chucky no longer looks the same. All these things are starting to be different now. They're more comedies, and obviously they righted the ship a little bit when they did Curse, but yeah, I just enjoy that title more than all these whatever of Chucky titles that they spew out for each movie.
I think part of it's just since they knew they were going for a slightly different tone than the movies before, and it's been, 7 years since the last movie. They wanted to try to keep things fresh. So, I mean, I don't have a giant problem with it, but I see why it might not necessarily be appealing.
Anyways, aside from that, Jennifer Tilly has good tits, I don't know.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't mind her as an actress, I just never found her particularly attractive.
I find her pretty attractive. I mean, she's more the type of woman I go for in terms of looks, body type, that type of thing, so.
I guess, like I said, I just want to reiterate, my biggest issue with this one is the tone was so much more lighthearted, and that's definitely not the direction. I mean, a little bit here and there makes sense with Chucky because he's such a well, he's a decently amusing guy, despite what he does. But I just think they made a mistake moving this direction, and I think with Seed of Chucky that becomes somewhat obvious.
Okay, well, Bride of Chucky does have its fair share of problems, all of which we've kind of just mentioned. It's got some funny moments, but it's trying to be too funny for what I would like out of a Child's Play movie. It's got decent deaths, but nothing that I have to, come back and watch again after seeing so many times throughout my life. But despite all of its flaws, because it still has Chucky, I still find it entertaining. I wouldn't call it a good movie, but for me, I'm going to rate it as if it was a good movie. I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10.
See, back in the day, I probably would have been somewhat close to that, maybe more like a 7 out of 10. But seeing it again, when I did, it lost so much of the appeal it used to have. So, this might sound like a unnecessarily low rating, but I'm going to throw this one a 5.5. I'm probably going to round that down to a 5 out of 10. Because aside from a few kills and a few bits of dialogue, I really found it somewhat difficult to really get into this one again. So, you may crucify me later.
5.5 rounded down to a 5. I'm trying to think of all the movies that you rated higher than this that were probably dog shit.
I can make you a list later if you want, but...
But I did see you recently changed your score for Sorority Row to a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention that, I'm probably going to lower that down back to a 5 out of 10.
Good. There's no way you should be rating that higher than this.
That is probably true.